the approach to yoga of the East is very subjective. And West, the Western mind is trained to approach things objectively, from the outside. It wants an ephemerical test. It wants a test, of scientific progress, of yogic progress, that which can be measured. The Eastern approach is subjective. It can validate it by personal experience. But not only is the validation of personal experience required, a guide and a senior professor, if I may use the word, is required for the sabbatical he takes for his yogic practice, to tell him the benchmarks of where he stands, because the master is like the witness. The student, the disciple, is the one involved in the spiritual activity himself. He himself is the state. So to stand apart and see it is more difficult than the person who is already the witness. So because it's a subjective state, it becomes more difficult to put it in an objective language. We can try it as far as we like. People have described it in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. To take a psychic experience as an enlightenment is not enlightenment. Because if you see a light or have an euphoric bliss, so you feel very blissful, you feel you're enlightened, it's certainly not an enlightenment. And people should be cautioned against this false placebo, because you're trapped in psychic experiences of bliss, of euphoria, a temporary so-called psychic orgasm, which you think to be the bliss of samadhi. So these things should be directed. There's bits and pieces of the whole. That I do agree. They're pathways to the main eternal bliss, which is indescribable. Because it is indescribable, you cannot frame it. You cannot frame it. You cannot put it into words. But yes, the moment you try to rationalize it, the experience breaks. Because rationale or rationalize means to break down, to set apart piece by piece. A rose looks beautiful only when it is a rose. When I try to rationalize it petal by petal and put it apart, it looks very ugly. So also something should be left for higher qualities than the arrogant human mind, which thinks that it knows everything, which thinks that everything should be rationalized, and which thinks that everything should be done like the man wants to do it. They want to see, now would you like to see God the way you want to see God, through rationality? Or would you like to see God as He is? What would you like to see God as?
As He is.
You would like to see God as He is. What would happen if you saw God scientifically through the manner that you have set forward? You, the human being, comparing with the cosmic God. Who are you? Where are you? What are you? Nothing. Either get lost in your ego or get lost in God. So, it's very important not to standardize that it is only called a science if it is in the test tube, if it can be measured in a laboratory. No, that's not the only way of knowing. No, there is another way of knowing. I respect the human being. I respect the energy of the human being, and therefore it's important to know the true self subjectively rather than objectively. So even subjective knowing, if repeatedly confirmed by thousands of people, becomes a scientifically valid fact. And who set the rules that it should be an objective laboratory test? Well, we can set the rule that it should be a subjective human test. There are many people, many poets, and many humble and sincere people who have experienced God in all His love and light. And they cannot bring to words, because words are very callous, they're very limited. So therefore, subjective experience of every individual, if tallied and concurred by 100 other individuals, becomes a scientific fact. This I postulate This I say with a great affirmation, and this should be so in the future, and it will be so, that a lot of respect will be given to the personal experience of the human being, the human mind, the human soul, and the human spirit. And if tens of thousands of people tally this experience, then nothing can stop it from being a scientific fact. Both are necessary. I'm not at all implying that science is not necessary and arts is necessary, or the objective approach of science is not necessary, and the subjective approach is the only way. No, it's not the only way. We need science, we need it at a particular level, but it has its limitations. Those limitations which it has can be completed by the subjective experience of man, who has his own tools of scientific measurements. He has an inner sight, he has clairvoyance, he has clairaudience, he has intuition, he has the 6 chakras, a fine laboratory within himself. He has the Kundalini energy and he can gauge. But I'm still saying that even if a single person can gauge and has a spiritual experience, it must be validated by many, many more people to make it a scientific fact, or to make it a realistic fact. So I'm just combining the scientific fact with the reality fact. And I must tell you that reality supersedes, interpenetrates, is vaster, and is the mother of all science.